Hey, folks, welcome back to the Change Physician Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, with my Amazeballs co-host, Miss Amazeballs herself, Dr. Melissa Cady. Dr. Cady, how are you today?
I'm great.
You're
I'm
great.
I'm waiting for some questions.
You're ready for some questions. All right. Well, for this episode, what we're going to be talking about is how to create a new hobby as a physician. And the importance of this should become self-evident, and particularly if you have gone through that physician path where you have pre-med, medical school, residency, fellowship in some situations. And maybe you've lost your hobbies like some of us have over along the lines and are interested in creating a new one. This episode is for you. So Dr. Cady,
yes.
Could you give us a little background on your hobbies, and particularly, did you have hobbies that you entered into medical school and the physician path with that you perhaps lost, or did you, were you hobbyist when you started? Were you big into hobbies before medical school? If so, let us know.
I would say I love to go out dancing with friends. I know that doesn't sound like hobby. I wasn't like, professional kind of ballet or anything like that. But I loved just, I don't like sitting. So I guess dancing worked well to just be physically, doing something. I feel like I have pretty good, I'm a pretty good dancer. I would say I'm the best, but I definitely can keep with the rhythm. I definitely have some skills there. Of course, the more you hone those, the better you be. But I think a lot of it went by the wayside after all of my training. That's probably my favorite thing. I would like literally be jazzed, pardon the pun, to go and go dancing. And I didn't need alcohol. Like literally, I'm that person back in high school who had, played a lot of sports. That was like kind of like my hobbies, anything that didn't have a racket, which I should have done tennis. That probably would have been my like ultimate sport. The one thing I regret is not doing tennis back in the day. I think I would have been an excellent tennis player, based on the fact that I was pretty good sprinter and pretty good at long distance and real agile, have good hand-eye coordination, and just love strategizing. All the things that kind of play into that. I wish I'd been exposed to that early in life, but can't change the past. But I enjoyed physical things, so dancing was not too surprising. But a lot of times at these sports end of the year little banquets, I would always be dragging everyone onto the little square fake dance floor that, and try to get people going. And that I think I had a better way. It was easier for me to express myself through dance than through words and small talk, or people at work know that I definitely enjoy good conversations. But sometimes when I'm in work mode, I'm not necessarily a big small talker. It's not that I don't care about people. It's not that I don't enjoy, getting to know them. It's just sometimes I'm kind of just focused on my task at hand. So, which is the point here, is that when you get so focused on your task, being work for many people of, in the medical world somewhere, you can be so fixated on that and drive some kind of gratification that you sometimes may not think you need those other things.
Well, and let's, this got brought up a good point.
Yep.
When I was listening to you talk is, let's define what a hobby is, because you said, I enjoy dancing. I'm not sure if that's actually a hobby. Well, I'm like, wait a second, we can't talk about hobbies without defining it. Yes. And so the definition of a hobby is an activity. Actually, we have three definitions here: an activity done regularly in one's leisure time for pleasure. All right, so we got it. It's active, regular, and leisure and pleasure. And then the definition of hobby from Merriam-Webster is a pursuit outside one's regular occupation, engaged in especially for relaxation. So we're seeing this as something that you do because you choose, and that there's a pleasure or relaxation aspect to it. And then the final one here would be an activity or interest pursued for pleasure or relaxation and not as a main occupation. So dancing would be a hobby if it's the picture, as long as you're not being forced to do it, right? So so we're looking for things that you're going to do that are outside of your main career path, that you're going to actively do, and you get some form of pleasure or relaxation associated with those. So when you enter then the medical realm,
Mhm.
Were you still pursuing hobbies, or did something change?
Well, I would say that, well, I it also had to do, I'd been married before, and that relationship ended at the end of my training, close to the when I had that last year, my pain fellowship training. I was on my own. So I think everything, I still would sporadically when I could, schedule allowing. That's the problem. A lot of our training, we don't have a lot of control or autonomy on when we work, when we don't. And then I think when it comes to private practice, sometimes you'll prioritize trying to, make a certain amount of money, and you put some things off. I'd have to say, of course, I met my current husband the following year, and then I started traveling. It doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the dancing. It's just like the patterns that we ran weren't. It would probably be every couple of weeks or once a month or something like that. It wasn't like every weekend like I try to do when I could. When I wasn't working in my training. But I have to say, I feel like the biggest impact has been the last few years, of course, with COVID. And it's not just that. I think probably the last 5 years, the environment of downtown Austin is not as conducive or as enjoyable or as safe. I mean, it's not like it's a completely unsafe place, but I feel like it's just grown so much. It's taken the joy out of. It's like you don't want to go downtown and deal with the parking issue, which now it's not free, but it's also frustrating. So it's just less. I guess I don't want to say at my age, but I'm at a point where I'm kind of don't want to deal with some crowds sometimes. I'd rather go out dancing when I leave my city and go on trips. Like that would be more fun. But I found joy in other things now too. So I think I put so much focus on dancing as one of my hobbies. I would keep returning to that, obviously, as a true hobby.
And you don't have to lose your hobby. I guess that's the one thing. And you're evolving here. So, but
right.
For someone who's perhaps been engaged in training and practice, and they're just so focused, and then you lose them. And what was it that, how did you explore, or what was the instigator that moved you into your new hobby that we're going to talk about in just a second here? But how did that process happen? How did you, was it a conscious, were you aware of it, or was it sort of a default thing?
Home ownership. Which happened.
Now, is that a hobby, or is that?
No, I'm saying the thing that is part of this process is that I mean, if I lived in an apartment or condo that didn't have a yard, then of course that wouldn't be part of any potential hobby, unless you have like a little porch thing or whatever. And then the pandemic and being more homebound and really seeing and being more aware of the neglect that's been occurring around me in my own yard. So that's kind of what trying to take it, to me, I think of it as taking advantage of a certain situation and capitalizing on it, and saving money in the process, and getting exercise in the process. And I'll tap into some of that later too.
So it sounds to me though, and what we're talking about basically is Melissa's love of gardening, right? That's where to make a long story short on, so we're not dancing around what her hobby is, but it sounds to me that this was not originally a hobby. No. But this was a, oh my gosh, oh, my yard looks bad, or
it could look so much better.
Well, I'm trying to think in that. So that's not necessarily, you did it not because of relaxation or pleasure, but you did it because of necessity. Is that kind of how that started?
Yeah. And I dabbled with it. I think I'm a pragmatic, practical person that likes to, if I'm going to do something in the yard, or I want it something to be like, I like pretty flowers or whatever, but I'm all about functional stuff. Like what's even the way I dress. I mean, a lot of times I'm like trying to be practical. I'm going to go outside, or I'm going to exercise, or I'm going to do some yard work. Sometimes I try to just maximize my time, and dress appropriately. But anyway, the whole point is that I think there's the whole, it kind of progressed. It was like a little splattering of this and that. I do this and play with it. And I'm not a master gardener by any means. I think the big thing, Kevin, is that this, I think, also ties into, I've become my own business owner in the last year. I absolutely, and this is the part in the last year I've learned a lot about myself, is even though if someone asked me, I probably could answer it, but intuitively I kind of knew. But now it's like I overtly know that I love to design and create. I like to be creative and I like to be original. I like to just express myself through creativity in a way that where I create a process for like my anesthesia patients, or I create and design like everything I'm doing in my home and trying to landscape. I get a little help here or there, but I essentially am trying to do it myself. There's a certain sense of gratification with that, but I think it's the fact that I have a vision. I like to have this vision and create, even if it doesn't always happen. There's so much joy I get out of designing things, and my mind just three-dimensionally works that way, that I think that's where I started seeing the excitement in it, not just because it's a task, but it's a big project with multiple little projects. And I'm really good at coordinating that. It's just, that's the way my mind likes to be organized. And so it's, I don't know. I'm trying to enjoy the process too, and not be stressed out about it.
So you had something that was a need or a perceived need,
or
that you started or yeah. Well, a want, but there, I'm just looking at, because from the statement of, you look at my house, oh my God, and my yard doesn't look good, right? Then there's almost I want it to look better, but the root of the want is that I'm embarrassed or ashamed of how it looks, or whatever the case may be.
Or I want it to look nicer.
Okay, yeah. So you move into this kind of external motivator.
Yeah.
And then there was an internal, like, do you remember what the transition was when it came to like doing your yard work, where you're like, hey, I'm actually enjoying this. I want to do this. When did that occur? Was it early, or was it a couple of weeks, or?
Well, with the sunroom that kind of came into play, once it was like, wow, I can actually sit and enjoy the outdoors. I'm like, I want to enjoy looking out at everything. So that's where I think the biggest seed was planted. Mm-hmm. But I think that when I realized that the cost, the couple things that I wanted to do, the cost was so high. I'm like, wait a minute, like I could do this. Like, I'm not a professional, but I could learn. I watch YouTube videos, figured out the supplies I need. And then I went and I would try to like price it out, and like, God, it's so much cheaper. But it's like 100-degree weather in Austin. And I'm like, you know what? I might have to take more breaks and hydrate more, but I'll take breaks and I'll build resilience. I'll change out my time I use for regular workouts, and I'll exchange it for doing this. And I end up working like anywhere from 2 to 6 hours outside. Mm-hmm. And the time goes by super fast. So I just started, playing with that. And I realized that this is very rewarding, other than, you don't realize your knuckles and your hands can get, and just say a couple fingers, and probably have an osteoarthritic tendency in a couple of them from previous jammings of the finger, but nothing that's horrible. It's just, you realize, wow, the people that do this all the time, they got to like work into it. But to answer your question, I think when I started just dabbling, I was like, oh, I'm going to go full force. I'm going to not just do this little 1 or 2 things I wanted. I might as well, since I'm here, and I'm not planning on traveling until the end of like 2022. I'm going to take advantage of this time at home and really just feel really good about accomplishing something that feels good, and break it up into basically what's become a hobby.
Well, it's become a hobby in such that it's something that you actively pursue.
Yeah.
that's outside of your occupation that
Mhm.
provides you relaxation and pleasure to you, right? And I just, it's so I'm looking at this as takeaways, and of course, because I've lost all my hobbies, I felt like, through training and residency and two small kids during residency,
Yeah.
and all this stuff. So if we had to say, well, what are you going to do? Like, if you are a physician who has lost your hobbies, the steps that I'm identifying from your journey is, one, this was not, in this particular situation, it was not necessarily intentional.
Mm-mm.
It came away as there was something that there was a perceived need that needed to be addressed. And while you were doing it, though, you sort of focused on the things that were actively enjoyable, or optimized your internal interest while doing this external behavior. Meaning, someone else could have said, oh, I have to do the yard work and I hate it. And they could have looked at all the negatives and negatives. And maybe, but what you sounds like you're doing is, while you're doing it, you're noticing, well, I have a sense of control. I have a sense of creativity, and I have a sense of creative design. And you started seeing and putting those other kind of interests that you have into this activity that was kind of, I don't want to say forced upon you, but it wasn't something that you didn't say, wake up one day and say, I want to be a gardener. I want to design my yard, kind of a deal. I mean, people can do that, but for this hobby, it kind of, they almost stumbled into the hobby of gardening by doing it and then integrating your already pre-existing interests into this new kind of media.
Right.
Than something
Right.
else.
Yeah, and I do think of long-term health. I think of the fact that, the blue zones we've talked about, that gardening is a big portion of people's, habits of longevity. And I think, I'm not 50 yet, but if I start creating this kind of area that kind of encourages that kind of activity, I was thinking that, it's great to be able to do some gardening. And the other thing is that keeping yourself learning, like, you could have different plants every year. You learn about them, you read about them, you benefit from them. Other people can benefit from them. You're moving, you're getting variety of movement. I like getting out in the sun a little bit. I don't want to be sun baked, but a little sun kissed, that might be nice. But
lightly done.
Right, lightly done. And it just feels good to move. It feels good to be out in the sun. For me, I enjoy it. And that whole thing about it being too hot, the thing is, if you do it a little bit every day, I mean, I've been increasing the amount of time I've been out there over time. You develop, you start accommodating to that, and your resilience is better. And so I feel like there's just so many benefits that I'm really realizing as I'm doing it. So I think for anyone that's wanting to tap into something, if there's something you need to do, maybe you could be part of that. It could be anything. You start tapping into doing it, and until you get a taste of it, you don't know if you like it. Mm-hmm. So I feel like just stepping into it and then giving it a chance, and then you'll know. And you can always stop. It's not like you're wasting your time, but you got to explore stuff. You won't know if you like Thai food unless you taste it. So, it's just we just had some Thai food last night. But that's the thing, is like, you don't really know. It's not like things fall out of the sky and tell you this is what you're going to enjoy. But if you're aware and you have kind of slow down and pay attention, and you really see all the things that you're tapping into that resonate with you, that make you feel good, that you find benefit to, and even from just your general wellness, you find there's a connection there that, you might as well do something along these lines, because you enjoy this and this and this, and it is good for you for this and this and this. If you can merge and marry those things, I think you found a great hobby that you can do all the time, or tap into at certain periods of time, whenever it makes sense. So I'm just, I just don't see any negative aspect to it. Maybe a little sore back, but I mean, I just know that I'm doing a lot more than I'm used to. And I just,
Well, and there's nothing wrong with a sore back,
No.
Yeah.
So. I just, what I do? I intermittently will just kind of do different motions that I haven't been doing for the last hour, do like maybe some opposite or some stretching and stuff, and just calm my nervous system down. And take a few deep breaths, and I go back at it and I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, I think you're actually selling this as a hobby, in many ways. It makes me want to actually go out and maybe garden in my backyard, because you hit these things about, like, one, I think I'm looking at it again from a physician perspective. You're a busy physician, you're coming home, you're tired, etc., but you're looking for something outside of this. One, the benefit that you have is that this is at your home, so you have no excuse. You don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to drive anywhere, you don't have to do anything. Two, like you said, there's an element of control associated with this, and as physicians we have a tendency to have a sense of control. So now you have an intention in this design process, or what you're going to make, or what you're going to do, or how you're going to direct it. Three, there's the physical activity benefit that you commented on, which, again, as a physician, and particularly if you want to stay healthy, and we know the importance of movement, now you have something that is requiring movement that you're actually getting a secondary gain with, because the movement that you're getting for exercise is actually tied into this other sense of creativity. The time perspective I thought was really fascinating when you were mentioning about this perception of creating the space that you're going to want to live in the future, and being able to optimize that. So now you're pulling into this anticipatory element. And when we kind of think about how the brain operates on these three different time perspectives, now you're actually optimizing it. So it's not just the here and now. It almost seems like you're getting into flow states when you're losing time, but you're actually going that future oriented perspective and the pleasures associated with that as well. And then, just this sense of accomplishment when you've completed it. So makes me want to garden. But I appreciate you talking about this journey, because it has certainly helped me, the person who is thinking about new hobbies, to identify, what important things are. It's something that I can do at home. It's something that is going to provide me a sense of fulfillment while I'm doing it. If I can add in other healthy things with that, as being, movement, food, connection, those type of things. And then lastly, if there's a sense of accomplishment, or I should say, there's a sense of fulfillment through all three time perspectives while I'm doing it, anticipation, as well as being able to look back and see it as accomplished, that would define an excellent hobby for me. And maybe it'll end up gardening like you, because you just made me like, oh my God, I need to go plant some Okinawan spinach in the backyard here.
Well, before you take us out, there's a few things I was just thinking of. Creating the space by giving yourself time, meaning you can't be working all the time and never have time for anything else. If you want to have hobbies, that's the whole point. It's outside of your work. Secondly, it goes by quickly, and you could listen to your favorite music, you could other things that you enjoy, or listen to podcasts, and I do both of those things. And it's a process. So by developing this habit, you keep your yard in check, your garden in check, by, even if it's 15 minutes a day. It's kind of like exercise, just going out there, pulling a few weeds, checking on things, being aware of the state of your outdoors, and just being outside for a few minutes, even if it's not, a lot of hard work. And then fourth is, when friends come over and they're in that environment, it's extraordinarily like calming, and it's something that people want to be around, and it's something you've created, and it feels good on both accounts. So those are my other incentives to do some yard or garden work.
Right on. That is fantastic. And I was thinking, then the next step for you is to be listening to music and then dancing while you're
that'll
gardening.
happen, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Once I get some newer grass that's a little more comfortable on the feet.
Well, that's awesome. And thank you very much, Melissa, for sharing that sort of journey with you. I hope the listeners out there get some takeaways. And would you mind taking us out, since
Sure.
I brought us in?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kevin, for interviewing me about one of my favorite recent hobbies, activities. And for those of you listening, I'm Melissa Cady, the Challenge Doctor. I challenge you to garden, or to do something, some hobby of your own that you'd love to try out. And I'm with my wonderful co-host and interviewer, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And we're part of the Change Physician podcast. If you want to be part of the community, you can go to thechangephysician.com, learn more about us, or go ahead and join our community, whether you're a physician or a physician ally. We'd love to see you there, and check us out on all the podcast venues, on YouTube for the video version as well. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care.
Stay well, folks.